Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 22nd and tonight's movie is M3gan. This movie is one that I was able to hear just in passing, and it is mostly just described as a horror movie that doesn't really take itself all too seriously. I mostly just saw a clip of the eponymous M3gan doll dancing. The topic of this movie, the main core of M3gan, is something that has only become more relevant since this movie's release in 2022: artificial intelligence. The main character is this woman who works for a robotic company. She's played by Allison Williams, who famously ate Fruit Loops in Get Out. And she has to take care of her niece, whose parents both died, and she's not equipped to it. So she gets an artificially intelligent doll whose product name can also be read as M3gan, and uses that as a companion slash protector. And how this always goes in these movies is that the robot becomes too protective to the point where it will harm other people and bad things happen. This is hardly a new concept. We heard about this stuff back in 1950 with iRobot, and this was literally the plot to a Jimmy Neutron episode. But apparently, this movie has its own unique take on it and is enjoyable from what I've heard. I'm gonna go give it a watch. It has been a while since I've watched a movie that was that stupid. I would describe M3gan as dumb before I would describe it as bad, but I also definitely wouldn't describe it as good. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 because I can see the appeal. There are some fun things in it and a lot of individual parts of it that do work, but it doesn't come together very well. It's not scary enough to be a straight up horror movie. It's not really smart enough to be like a good satirical comedy, and it's not even silly enough to be like a goofy B movie type of thing. It is extremely watchable, though. It was able to hold my attention better than movies I've seen this month that I like significantly more. And even though I did mention the fact that it doesn't really seem to know what it's trying to do, my biggest issue with M3gan is the same one I had with The Endless from yesterday, which is a bad main character. Gemma from M3gan is not nearly as unlikable as Erin from The Endless, but yeah, she is pretty terrible. I'm pretty sure they were going for the absent-minded geek archetype with her, and that was kind of the vibe I got at the beginning. But as the movie keeps going, she reveals herself to be incredibly negligent, downright incompetent in a lot of places, and also kind of self-centered. There is one scene towards the end of the film that I guess is supposed to be her redemption, but it is so out of pocket and so unearned that it just feels lazy. I was actually really hopeful about this movie at the beginning because some of the first stuff they show you is something this movie is actually quite good at, which is social satire. The first thing that started, I actually thought I had gotten an ad because it looks exactly like an ad for a toy. And the first 10 minutes of this movie are actually really amusing and it serves as some really good social satire. There is a lot of very good moments of satire in this film. It satirizes the way that corporations exploit child psychology. It satirizes the way that parents look for excuses to not have to parent their own children. Even girl boss culture catches a stray at one point. But the movie isn't really trying to make a point about any of those topics. The only point or lesson or moral that they try to push, again, sort of came out of nowhere. I can imagine that this movie is a lot more enjoyable if you're watching it with friends and you're riffing on it while it's happening. But when you look at the whole thing in its entirety, it feels like there were too many halfway pursued ideas about what the movie was trying to accomplish. I don't really know who M3gan is supposed to be for. And again, there are good things in it. I can understand another person watching this and just being entertained by it. That's fine, but I didn't really see this as a success in any of the things that it tried. And in order to go into more detail, I'm going to start with the spoilers. One of the first things that clued me into the fact that Gemma is not exactly the best person is the fact that she is very insistent on having custody of her niece, her recently orphaned niece, even though she says herself that she is not at all equipped to take care of a kid. But when the offer is made, hey, those grandparents will take in the kid. She's like, oh no, they live in Florida and they're weird. And there's no expanding on that. And she doesn't really try to change that part of her throughout the movie. Like, everything that she does in this movie is not for the sake of the kid, it's for the sake of herself. At no point in this movie is she actually able to protect the child. The child is the one who has to save her. And I thought that M3gan was something that her company was working on and she was like the head of development. No, this is her own project that she misappropriated funds from her company in order to like make. That's not what she's supposed to be doing. She was supposed to be doing something else. And it's only because of the appeal of M3gan, once they finally iron out enough kinks to have a good looking presentation, that she doesn't get like fired or sued over this. They established that she has a neighbor who has this dog, and the dog is like barking a lot and like goes over to her property a lot. And there's an incident where M3gan and the girl named Katie are trying to get something that went over the fence into their yard, and they like reach through a hole in the fence, and the dog bites them. And after that, Gemma really wants to have that dog put down, even though the police have to explain to her, no, this dog has no prior history of violence, and your kids were the one that were going over onto their property. Not to mention, they made it a point to show that she was not supervising them at all. She was in her office with her headphones in and couldn't even hear the child she was tasked with taking care of screaming for help. And then the next day, she like guilt trips her into doing this demonstration for the company. Then there's also the fact that all the crimes, injuries, and murders that happen as a result of M3gan's rampage can all be led directly back to Gemma and her own negligence and incompetence throughout this entire film. If there was any sort of like consistent justice in this world of this movie, those police that come to the house at the end of the movie would go right on to send her to prison. And again, that like redemption arc they gave her is so half assed. Throughout the entire movie, she is using this situation to further neglect this child in her care and exploit her for her own personal gain. But the like big revelation in the movie is she acts like she gave Katie M3gan because she didn't know how to deal with a kid whose parents had just died. And it's not good to try to distract yourself from your own pain or something like that. And it made me wonder if the script for an entirely different movie got mixed in with this one because there was no build up to that. Obviously, that is true and that does make sense, but when we're talking about things that she needed to like take accountability for and mistakes that she needed to admit to, that's not even in the top 10. But that's enough about complaining about Gemma. I think you put together that I don't like her at all. I do like the way that they executed this robotic doll in this movie. They had a child actor to like physically act, and I imagine it's a combination of editing and like physical acting on that child actor's part that made it look very robotic. And I'm fairly certain that she was wearing like a silicone mask, so her face didn't move normally when she spoke. It is kind of chilling the way that she can like hack things and manipulate other people because that's software stuff. That's believable. But then you get to other things like her being able to rip off a boy's ear with her bare hand, be able to like pull on a pulley and lift a fully grown man off the ground and do a bunch of other stuff that she should not be able to do. That's not software, that's hardware. They would have had to have made the conscious decision to put components into this doll made for children that has that much force. Why would you ever need that? And again, the ending is really underwhelming because it's not Gemma who has to ultimately stop M3gan, it's Katie, the child. And she doesn't even do that by taking advantage of the fact that I would think that since her primary goal is to be a friend to and protect Katie, Katie's the only one who's able to like talk her down from a rampage or something. But no, it's purely physical. Like at the beginning of the movie, Gemma shows Katie like this motion capture robot that she made in college, and she uses that to fight M3gan. And it just felt so forced and so dumb. And then that doesn't even work. So she just stabs a screwdriver into M3gan's face. And since I'm the one keeping score and I'm petty and I'm biased, I'm pretty sure that means that Gemma was not able to do even one single thing right in this entire film. Aside from all of the many, many problems concerning the main character, M3gan at no point feels like it actually knows what it wants to be. There are moments that are really silly and goofy in a campy, fun way. There are some moments of a really clever comedy. There are some hints of a good horror movie in here, but mostly it's not any of those things. It is extremely watchable. I will give it that. It will hold your gaze for 100 minutes, no problem. But I don't really think it excelled at anything it tried to do. There were moments of great, but overall, it didn't come together. And that's about all I have to say. See you tomorrow.